Everyone's asking the same question. Is a recession coming? And if it is, what does it mean for crypto? Well, I just spent hours diving deep into the macroeconomic data, and trust me, what I found surprised even me. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly where we're headed, how crypto might respond, and why ignoring these signals could cost you massively. Let's dive in. Yesterday was Trump's Liberation Day, and he came out with maybe the most insane tariffs the world has ever seen. And when I say insane, I really mean it. These tariffs were mind-blowingly insane high, far outside of even the most wild guesses. To show you what I mean, Vietnam charges the US a tariff of around 9.5%. However, if you looked at the tariff amount charged to the US claimed by Trump, it was around 92%. That's because, according to Trump, they didn't just add in the tariff amount, but they added in currency manipulation and trade barriers to come up with a much higher number, which they say is representative of the total trade friction of that country. Some people pointed out that the way they came up with this number is it's simply the nation's trade deficit with us divided by the nation's export to us. But however you want to cut it, these numbers blew everyone out of the water. Again, expectations would be with Vietnam, since they have 9.5%, people were expecting, okay, maybe worst case scenario, we do 9.5% tariffs back towards Vietnam. Instead, Trump unveiled 46% tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, toward Vietnam, with many of these other numbers being just as insanely large. And what people are worried about with these tariffs is that it'll cause a global recession. Many of these countries, if they were left with these tariffs at these levels, would absolutely implode. Their economies would be decimated. And obviously, that would not be very good for our crypto bags. So are we headed for a recession or not? Well, if you believe these tariffs are finalized, they're going to stick, there's going to be no negotiating between these countries, none of the countries are going to respond and lower their own tariffs, then yes, this is absolutely signaling a strong indicator that it's likely we're heading towards a global recession, and crypto is going to be absolutely burnt to the ground. However, if you believe this is stage one in a negotiation process and that a lot of these countries are going to respond and concede to Trump's demands, then the picture isn't quite as bleak. And I personally sit in the second camp. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of these economies would absolutely implode if these tariffs were left in place. They have absolutely no choice but to come to the negotiation table and make every single concession that Trump demands. Otherwise, they're going to watch their entire economy implode. In fact, we're already seeing this with a lot of countries coming to the table saying, hey, they're going to do whatever it takes to get these tariffs off of their country because they absolutely need to get these tariffs off of their country in order to survive. And as long as we get enough countries who are coming to the table and making a deal, there is a potential to have a really good outcome. However, this is made muddy by the fact that Trump didn't do exact reciprocal tariffs, but added in this arbitrary extra amount that it's unclear how these countries can remove that extra amount. And that really is the piece of the puzzle that should worry people. If this was just pure across the table reciprocal tariffs, I think this would be a lot easier of a process where these countries just lower their tariffs to zero, we lower our tariffs to zero, and then everything's fine. However, currently, say for example, Vietnam, if they were to lower their tariffs to zero, great, that might knock 9% off their tariff from 45% down to, the high 30s, but that's still an unbearable tariff for them to face. And if it's accurate that it's simply based on the nation's trade deficit with us divided by the nation's exports to us, that is just not something that they're going to be able to fix overnight in order to solve this problem. So if Trump is unwilling to budge on that detail, then that does vastly increase the odds that we are heading into recessionary territory. Basically, it comes down to, do you believe that Trump is serious about these high numbers, that he came out with them actually thinking that they're reasonable and that he's going to hold his ground? Or do you believe that Trump is using extreme anchoring, coming out with an absolutely insane firsthand in order to get a really good deal, and that he's going to make concessions himself later down the line? If you believe that he's willing to make concessions and he intended to come out with an extreme firsthand, then you're believing the future where the outcome should turn out all right. If you believe he's not willing to concede, then that could mean a lot more pain in the near term. Now, on top of this, you also have the liquidity retraction we've been witnessing due to Doge and the hiring reductions, reduced spending from the government. Government spending has been artificially keeping the economy afloat. Reducing that spending without offsetting it somewhere else is going to have a negative impact on the markets. However, we do have a response to both the reduction in liquidity and the potential negative tariff outcome, and that is the Fed cutting. If you remember, during COVID, we shut down the entire world. The world literally stopped turning. People stopped working. Ships stopped shipping. It was far more of an insane situation than what we're going through today. Rates back then were only at 1.5%. And think of that percentage amount as basically the amount of ammo that the Fed has to combat a recession. And once they run out of that ammo and reduce rates down to zero, think of QE as like their emergency reserve ammo. If you remember back in 2020, we did see an insane market sell-off. But then the Fed cut rates to zero. They started doing QE, and then we had one of the most insane bull runs ever. In 2020, I would compare the recession threat to 10,000 enemy soldiers standing outside of our walls declaring war. Today, the recession threat would be like a roaming band of 1,000 in the distance who we're not even sure is going to attack. While at the same time, we're sitting fully stocked at 4.25%. We have vastly more ammo than we did back in the COVID era when we were sitting at only 1.5%. And to go further with the analogy, basically think of it back in the day as we had 10,500 troops to fight off this, attacking enemy band of 10,000 troops, where today it'd be like if we had 40,500 troops to defend against 1,000 troops who could be potentially attacking. Again, we're not even sure. In my opinion, a lot of people are just scared and nervous because we just went through this insane kind of traumatizing period in the 2020s where things did get really bad. Inflation went really high. And, we had all these issues. Right now, the Fed is already saying that it's going to take them 2 years to conquer inflation. They're already giving ample room so that they could cut if need be, if the economy looks like it's going to weaken. And they'll be able to say, hey, don't worry about inflation. We're going to deal with it over the next 2 years. And speaking of inflation, if you look at the Trueflation data, inflation's falling off a cliff, and the next print should come in really, really good. And actually look at this chart. Do you honestly believe that right now is the second most uncertain time in the last generation? My personal belief, after looking at all the data, is that the threat is overblown. People are amped up by fear and political bias and all these other reasons to believe that right now is just this horrible, horrendous time where everything's going to fall apart. But in my opinion, the current setup does not honestly reflect that. As I've been saying for the last couple months, I believe the Fed is going to cut a lot more than the anticipated 1 to 2 cuts that have been forecasted by the market. That'll unleash credit, that'll unleash liquidity, that'll pump up the markets. And gun to my head, if I had to make a decision, I would bet everything I have. In fact, I am betting everything I have. Everything I have is invested into the markets besides some cash in my bank, and I'm in the process of selling my house. And that cash, once I sell it, will also be going into the markets. I would bet everything that I have that by the end of the year, the markets are higher than they are today. As always, though, none of this is investment advice. None of this is me telling you to invest in anything. This is just my thoughts and opinions about the markets. Sometimes I'm wrong. I certainly do not have a perfect forecasting ability. I'm always learning, I'm always improving, and I'm always growing to become a better investor and a better trader in the crypto space. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.